Mark had always been a practical person. When he bought his small suburban house, he imagined weekends spent fixing it up, making it feel like home. The house was old, built in the 1960s, and the basement was the one part of it that never seemed quite right. The walls were damp, the air musty, and there was a faint smell of something long forgotten. Mark had always avoided spending much time down there, but today he felt determined. Armed with his toolbox and a sense of purpose, he ventured into the basement. He had big plans to clear out the clutter, patch up the walls, and maybe even install some new lights. As he worked, dust and dirt fell from the ceiling, but Mark didn't mind. He was used to it. As he moved a large stack of old boxes and furniture against the far wall, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another pile of junk, but as he stepped closer, he realized it was something unusual, something metal, shaped like a small pod, half buried beneath the debris. It gleamed faintly in the dim light, and Mark felt a strange sensation run through him, as though he was standing in front of something that didn't belong in this world. He knelt down, brushing away the dust and cobwebs. The object was smooth and metallic, with intricate patterns etched into its surface. It was about the size of a large chest, round at the edges, and had a soft, pulsating glow coming from within. Mark stared at it for a long moment, unsure of what to think. "Is this some kind of weird storage container?" he muttered to himself, but that didn't seem to explain the strange energy it radiated. Curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out, gently touching the pod's surface. The moment his fingers made contact, there was a low hum, almost like a vibration. Mark quickly pulled his hand back, startled. He had no idea what this thing was, but it was clearly more than just some old junk. His heart pounded as he stood up, surveying the area. Was he imagining things? "No, I need to figure this out," he thought. He grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox and carefully pried at the edges of the pod. It resisted at first, but after some effort, the lid began to crack open. There was a rush of air, like a deep exhale, and Mark took a step back. His mind raced, but he couldn't stop himself from peering inside. Inside the pod, nestled in what looked like a soft, shimmering bed of energy, was a figure. At first, Mark couldn't make out what it was. His heart skipped a beat, and he squinted, trying to get a better look. It was a woman. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, and she seemed to glow in the soft light. Her hair was long and seemed to shimmer with a faint bluish hue. She was dressed in a strange, smooth fabric that looked nothing like anything Mark had ever seen before. The woman appeared to be in some sort of deep sleep, her chest rising and falling slowly with each breath. Mark's mind spun. He stood there for several moments, his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was this some sort of high-tech statue, a work of art? But no, it was too real. The woman was breathing. She was alive. A mixture of awe and panic swept through him. Should he call the authorities? But then, what would he say? "Hey, I found an alien in my basement." It all felt too impossible to believe. He took a step closer, his heart racing. As he carefully reached out to touch her arm, the room seemed to change. The air grew cooler, and a faint, soft hum resonated around him. Mark's hand brushed against her skin, and in that instant, her eyes snapped open. Her eyes were an intense shade of violet, and they locked onto Mark's with a look of confusion and fear. She gasped, her breathing quickening, and instinctively, she pushed herself up, though she seemed weak. Mark froze, not knowing what to do. This was no ordinary person. She wasn't human. He felt a rush of adrenaline as he took a step back, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Hey, it's okay," he said softly, trying to calm her. He wasn't sure why, but he knew he had to try to make her feel safe. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe." The woman's breathing slowed, though her eyes still darted around the room, taking in her unfamiliar surroundings. Her gaze finally settled on him again, and she spoke in a language Mark didn't understand. Her voice was melodic, like music from another world, but he couldn't grasp any of the words. I don't understand, Mark stammered. Are you okay? Her gaze softened slightly, but she didn't seem to understand him either. However, there was a brief moment where Mark could see something else in her eyes, a flicker of recognition. Suddenly, she took a deep breath, her voice shifting, now speaking broken English. I am Kalia, she said, her words slow but clear. I am lost. Mark felt a wave of relief wash over him. At least she could understand him now. Kalia? What happened? Where are you from? Mark asked, his voice trembling with both awe and confusion. Kalia's eyes clouded with confusion. She appeared disoriented, but after a few moments, she spoke again. I do not know. I was in stasis for a long time. Her words trailed off, and she seemed to struggle to piece together her thoughts. I was sent to Earth, but I do not remember why. Mark's mind raced, his curiosity piqued. He had so many questions, but he knew he had to be careful. The mystery of the woman in the pod had just begun. Kalia sat up slowly, her head spinning. Mark watched her carefully, not sure what to do. She was still shaking, her violet eyes darting around as if trying to make sense of her surroundings. She had been unconscious just moments ago, and now she was awake, alive, but confused and lost. The basement was cold, and the faint light from the pod flickered as if struggling to stay on. Mark felt an odd sense of responsibility wash over him. Here she was, an alien woman, possibly from another world, and he was the one who had found her. He couldn't just leave her alone, especially not in her state. Are you okay? Mark asked gently, taking a cautious step closer. He wasn't sure what to say next. What if she didn't understand him? What if she attacked him? But Kalia didn't seem threatening, just confused and frightened. Kalia looked at him for a moment, as if trying to process his words. Then her lips parted, and she spoke again, her voice now slower and more deliberate. I am confused, she said, her words breaking the silence. I do not know where I am, or how I arrived. Mark took another careful step forward, his voice soft. You're in my basement. I don't know how you got here, but I'll help you. She looked at him blankly, still unsure of what he meant. Mark felt a wave of sympathy for her. She wasn't just lost. She was completely out of place, alone, in a strange world. Look, my name is Mark, he said, trying to keep his tone calm. You don't need to be scared. I won't hurt you. For a moment, there was silence as Kalia studied him, her large violet eyes searching his face. Mark thought he saw a flicker of understanding in her gaze. Slowly, she nodded, her delicate features softening slightly, but she still looked troubled. I was sent, she said, her voice trailing off as if she were trying to remember something important. I was in stasis for so long. Mark knelt down beside her, careful not to get too close too fast. What do you mean? Where were you sent from? How long have you been in there? Kalia's gaze shifted to the pod that still sat open beside her. She frowned as she traced her fingers lightly along the edge of it. The glowing patterns on the pod seemed to respond to her touch, pulsing gently in time with her movements. I do not know exactly, she said quietly. I am Kalia. I come from a distant place, from beyond the stars. Mark blinked. Beyond the stars? You mean, like outer space? She nodded slowly, though it was clear she was still struggling with her memories. Yes, I do not know how long I have been gone. Time has passed differently for me. But I was sent here to Earth, to complete a mission. But I cannot remember. Mark couldn't help but be amazed. An alien from another world. He had never imagined anything like this would happen to him. His mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. So, you were on a mission? To Earth? Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady. What was your mission? And how did you end up in my basement? Kalia closed her eyes for a moment, her fingers lightly touching the side of her head, as if trying to recall something important. After a few long seconds, she looked at Mark again, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and fear. "I do not remember," she admitted softly. "I was in stasis. My memories, they are fragmented." Mark could see that she was deeply distressed by her inability to remember. He wanted to help her, but he wasn't sure how. He didn't know anything about alien technology, much less how to wake up her memories. But he couldn't just leave her alone. Not like this. "Do you think maybe you could remember if we tried to figure it out together?" Mark suggested. "I can help you. I don't know how, but I'll do whatever I can." Kalia looked at him, her gaze softening just a little. "You would help me?" Mark nodded, trying to reassure her. "Of course. You're not alone here. I'll figure out how to help you remember, or whatever you need." For the first time since waking, Kalia's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. "Thank you, Mark. I do not know how to repay you." Mark smiled back, though his mind was still reeling. What did she mean by repay? She was an alien from another world, and somehow she was trusting him. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure. This was far bigger than just some odd discovery in his basement. This was something that could change everything. As Kalia stood up shakily, Mark offered his arm to support her. She hesitated for a moment before accepting his help. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity now, though there was still a hint of fear beneath it. "I don't know yet," Mark admitted, "but wherever it is, I'll help you get there. We're in this together." Kalia nodded. "I trust you, Mark. I can feel your honesty." And as they both stood there, the faint glow from the pod slowly dimming, Mark realized that his life had just changed forever. The mystery of Kalia was just beginning, and he was right in the middle of it. The next few days were a blur for Mark. After Kalia had woken up, they spent hours talking, trying to understand what had happened to her. She had trouble remembering much about her past, but each day, small pieces of her history came back to her like fragments of a broken puzzle. Mark had been patient with her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her story. Kalia was from somewhere far beyond Earth, and it seemed that she had been sent on some kind of mission. But what was the mission? Why was she here? And why had she been in stasis for so long? He couldn't ignore the questions swirling in his mind. He had to know more, not only for his own peace of mind, but for Kalia's safety as well. The more he learned about her, the more dangerous this situation seemed. She was no ordinary woman. She was something different, something extraordinary. One evening, as the sun began to set and the shadows grew long in the basement, Mark sat with Kalia. She was still adjusting to Earth's ways, its gravity, its food, and the language. Mark had been teaching her slowly, trying to make sure she felt comfortable and safe. "You're doing great," Mark said encouragingly, watching as Kalia practiced writing Earth symbols on a piece of paper. She still struggled with the shapes, but she was improving each day. "I feel strange," Kalia admitted, putting down the pen and rubbing her temples. "I can understand what you say, but sometimes it's hard to make sense of everything here. The world is so different." Mark smiled gently, offering her a glass of water. "I know it must be overwhelming, but we'll figure it out together. You're not alone anymore." Kalia took a sip of the water, her violet eyes meeting his. "You have been kind to me, Mark. I cannot explain why, but I feel as if I can trust you." Mark paused. She was right. From the moment he found her in that pod, something inside him had felt the need to protect her. He wasn't sure why, but he had no intention of turning his back on her now. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything," Mark said softly. "But we should try to figure out what happened to you, and how we can get you back to where you came from. You deserve answers." Kalia nodded, but her expression turned serious. "I have been trying to remember, but something is blocking my thoughts. My mind is clouded. There is something important, something I need to recall, but it slips away each time. Mark felt a twinge of worry. What was she forgetting? Was it something dangerous, something that could put them both at risk? "We'll find a way to help you," Mark said with conviction, though he wasn't sure how. "But I think we need to explore more about where you came from. I don't think you ended up here by accident." Kalia's eyes darkened. "You are right. I was sent here, but I do not know why. I remember being part of something larger, something important. But that memory is buried deep inside me. I need to remember." Mark stood up and paced across the room, his mind racing. What if your mission has something to do with Earth? What if you were sent to do something here, and that's why you were in stasis? Maybe the answers are hidden somewhere. A place, a person, or even a memory. Kalia stared at him, her gaze piercing. "You may be right. I was sent for a reason. But the reason is hidden from me. It feels wrong. I can feel the truth, but I cannot reach it." Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. There was no easy way to unlock her memories. He needed help, someone who understood more than he did. He couldn't solve this on his own. "I think we need to go outside the house," Mark said suddenly. "There's a place I know that might help us." Kalia raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "There's a library not far from here," Mark explained. "I've read about ancient artifacts and unexplained events. Maybe we can find something, anything, that connects to you." Kalia stood up, her eyes bright with determination. "Let us go then. I will follow you. Perhaps we will uncover something that will help me." Mark grabbed his jacket, feeling a rush of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the answers they were looking for were closer than they thought. The two of them left the house under the cover of night, slipping into the shadows. The library was an old building, full of dusty books and forgotten knowledge. Mark had always loved it for that reason. It felt like a place where secrets were just waiting to be uncovered. When they arrived, they moved quietly through the rows of bookshelves, Kalia following closely behind. The library was nearly empty, the only sound the soft shuffle of their footsteps. Mark stopped at a section about ancient civilizations and alien encounters. He had read a few books on the subject, but now he was searching for something specific. "Anything?" Kalia asked, her voice low and curious. "I'm looking for anything that could relate to you," Mark replied. "Anything about otherworldly visitors or missions." Kalia nodded but remained silent, her thoughts far away. Mark continued scanning the bookshelves, hoping that somewhere, hidden among the pages, they would find the key to unlocking her past. The library was eerily quiet, its tall bookshelves towering like silent sentinels in the dim light. Mark and Kalia walked down the aisles, the air thick with dust and the smell of old paper. They had already spent an hour combing through the shelves, but Mark was growing impatient. He hadn't found anything useful yet, and time seemed to be slipping away. Kalia walked beside him, her eyes scanning the books with a quiet intensity. Every so often, she would reach out to touch a book, only to pull her hand back, as if she wasn't sure if it was the right one. "I'm sorry," Mark said, breaking the silence. "I know this is frustrating, but we have to keep looking. There has to be something here that can help us." Kalia gave him a small, understanding smile. "I understand, Mark. I will stay patient. But I feel something. There is a connection here, but I do not know what it is." Mark looked at her. Kalia's words were strange. A connection. Was she feeling something that he couldn't? He had always been a logical person, believing in facts and evidence, but Kalia was different. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. "Maybe we're not looking in the right section," Mark said, trying to stay optimistic. "Let's try another part of the library." They walked to a different aisle, this one filled with old records and mysterious manuscripts. The books were heavier, their covers faded with age. As Mark scanned the titles, something caught his eye. A small, leather-bound book, tucked away at the very back of the shelf, almost hidden from view. He reached for it, pulling it out carefully. The cover was cracked, and the pages inside looked yellowed with age. The title was written in a strange language, one Mark had never seen before. But there was something about the book, something that felt right. "This could be it," Mark said, his voice filled with a sense of excitement. "It might have the answers we're looking for." Kalia stepped closer, her eyes studying the book. "This is familiar," she said quietly. "I know this language. It is from my world." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Kalia recognized the language. Was this book really connected to her past? His heart raced as he opened it, his fingers trembling as he turned the pages. The book was filled with symbols and strange writings, none of which made sense to him. But Kalia's eyes widened as she looked over his shoulder, her fingers brushing lightly against the pages. "I know these symbols," she whispered. "They are from the ancient records of my people. This book, it holds knowledge I have long forgotten." Mark looked at her, his curiosity growing. "What does it say? Can you read it?" Kalia nodded, her eyes fixed on the pages. "This book tells the story of a great mission, a mission sent to Earth. My people came here long ago in search of something, but they were not the only ones. There were others, other beings, not from my world, who came for the same reason." Mark's mind was racing. Other beings. What were they looking for? Kalia's expression grew serious, and she traced a finger along a particularly worn page. They were searching for a power that could change the balance of the universe. My people were sent to protect it, but we failed. Mark's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean failed?" Kalia turned the page, her voice growing quieter. "The power was hidden long ago, in a place no one could find. But the beings who came after us, they succeeded. They found it. And now, they are searching for it again." Mark felt a sense of dread settle over him. Are they still looking for it? Do you think they could be here now? Kalia closed the book with a snap, her face grim. "I do not know, but I can feel it. The power is still here, on Earth, and if they find it again, it could mean the end of everything." Mark's stomach twisted with fear. This was far bigger than he had imagined. He had thought they were simply uncovering Kalia's past, but now it seemed like they were dealing with something much more dangerous. "We need to find out where this power is hidden," Mark said urgently. "If these beings are still out there, we can't let them get their hands on it." Kalia nodded, her face set with determination. "We will find it. Together. But we must be careful. If they are still searching, they will not stop until they have what they want." Mark closed the book, his mind working quickly. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about helping Kalia anymore. It was about protecting the entire world. "We need to get back to the house," Mark said, his voice firm. "We can't waste any more time." Kalia agreed without hesitation. As they made their way out of the library, Mark felt a strange sense of urgency. There was no time to lose. The power Kalia spoke of was real, and whoever controlled it could change the course of history. The world outside was dark now, the streets empty and silent. As Mark and Kalia walked through the quiet town, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The danger was real, and it was closing in fast. "We need to be ready," Mark muttered under his breath. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Kalia glanced at him, her eyes glowing with the same fierce determination that he felt inside. Together. And as they disappeared into the shadows of the night, they both knew one thing for sure. Their journey had just begun. The secrets of Kalia's world and the hidden power were waiting to be uncovered. But they had to act quickly before it was too late. The sky had darkened, and Mark's pulse quickened as they walked back to his house. Kalia had been unusually quiet, her mind clearly focused on the ancient book and the secrets it held. Mark couldn't stop thinking about what they had learned, about the hidden power that had been lost, and the beings who had come to find it again. "We have to move fast," Mark said, glancing at Kalia. "If someone else is after this power, they could be closer than we think." Kalia nodded but didn't say anything. Her silence spoke volumes. She was thinking of something he didn't fully understand. Back at the house, Mark led Kalia down to the basement. The space was familiar, but now it felt different. The secret that had been buried for so long in the corner of the room. The pod loomed in his mind. He had to find out what it really was, what it meant. Mark stood in front of the small wooden door that led to the basement. He hesitated for a moment, then turned to Kalia. You think there's more to that pod? You think it's connected to the power? Kalia's eyes narrowed as she glanced at the door. Yes, Mark. I feel it. The pod is not just a strange object. It's a key to understanding the power and why it's hidden. Mark pushed open the door, and they stepped down the old wooden stairs. As they reached the basement, Kalia went straight to the corner, where the pod had been hidden beneath the floorboards. Look at this, Kalia murmured. This is where it all begins. Mark watched as Kalia bent down, her fingers brushing over the surface of the pod. It was still sealed tightly, the glass-like surface smooth and cold. But Kalia's touch seemed to stir something within it. The air around them felt different, charged with an unseen energy. Is it alive? Mark asked, stepping closer. His heart raced as he felt a strange pull toward the pod. It was like something was calling to him, urging him to open it. Kalia glanced at him, her face serious. I don't know, but we must open it. The time has come. Mark took a deep breath, then knelt down beside the pod. He gently pressed a button on its side, and the surface of the pod began to glow faintly. Slowly, a hiss filled the air, and the pod began to open, revealing what was inside. Mark gasped as the lid lifted. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft, glowing material, was a figure, a woman, an alien woman. She was beautiful, her features delicate and graceful, with long silver hair that shimmered even in the dim light. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, almost translucent, with markings that seemed to shift and move across her body. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had seen nothing like her before. Kalia stepped forward, her eyes wide with recognition. It's her, she whispered. The one we were searching for. Mark looked at her, confused. Who is she? What does she have to do with the power? Kalia's voice was soft, but filled with reverence. She is the guardian, the one chosen to protect the power. She was sent here to keep it safe, to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Mark's mind raced. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. The pod, the power, the beings after it. It all connected now. Kalia carefully reached out and touched the alien woman's forehead. The moment her fingers made contact, the woman's eyes fluttered open. Mark stepped back in surprise as she slowly sat up, her eyes scanning the room with confusion. Where am I? Her voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it. Who are you? Kalia smiled warmly. I am Kalia. We've been searching for you. The alien woman looked at Kalia, her eyes narrowing. Kalia, I remember you. I remember everything. Mark took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. Do you know what's happening? Do you know who's after the power? The alien woman looked at him, then glanced back at Kalia. The power, it's hidden, but it can be unlocked, but only by the one who was meant to find it. You, Kalia, are that one. Kalia's expression hardened, but there are others searching. Others who will stop at nothing to take it. The alien woman's gaze darkened, and she nodded. Yes, they are called the Seekers. They will come for the power, no matter the cost. And if they succeed, they will bring destruction to this world. Mark felt the weight of her words. The Seekers were real, and they were coming. What do we do? Mark asked, his voice filled with urgency. The alien woman stood, her body glowing faintly. You must find the key to unlocking the power. Only then will you be able to protect it. But be warned, the Seekers will be close behind you. They have been waiting for this moment. Kalia stepped forward, her eyes locked onto the alien woman's. We will not let them take it. We'll find the key. Together. Mark nodded, feeling the same fierce determination in his heart. They had no time to waste. The power had to be protected, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from them. As the alien woman stood up fully, her eyes glowing with a strange light, Mark felt the ground shift beneath him. The path ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. The race to find the key had begun. The tension in the room was thick, and Mark could feel it in the pit of his stomach. The alien woman, who had just awakened from centuries of sleep, stood in front of him, her blue skin shimmering softly in the dim light of the basement. Kalia's eyes were filled with determination, but also a deep concern. They had learned that the Seekers were real, and they were coming. The alien woman, who had introduced herself as Lyra, turned to Kalia. You must find the key, she repeated, her voice steady but serious. The power cannot fall into the wrong hands. The Seekers will stop at nothing to claim it. Kalia nodded slowly. But where do we start? What is this key? How do we find it? Lyra looked at her, her glowing eyes narrowing, as if searching through time itself. The key is not a physical object. It is a place lost to time, hidden deep within the earth. You will know it when you see it, but you must hurry. The Seekers are already close. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The Seekers were closer than they thought. He didn't know how, but something in the air felt different now. They didn't have much time. I don't understand, Mark said, his voice filled with urgency. How do we even begin searching for something that's hidden? And how do we stop them once they find it? Lyra's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him. You, Mark, are part of the answer. The power recognizes you. It has chosen you, just as it has chosen Kalia. You are not alone in this. You are more connected to this than you realize. Mark's head spun. Chosen? How? He was just a regular guy. This was all too much to take in. Kalia stepped forward, her eyes focused on Lyra. How do we unlock the power? What is it that we're looking for? Lyra's expression became more serious. The power is an energy, ancient and pure. It is tied to the very fabric of this world. To unlock it, you must find the Heartstone. It is a crystal, glowing with the essence of life itself. Once you have it, you can control the power, but be careful. The Seekers want it more than anything. If they find it first, they will use it to destroy, not protect. Mark swallowed hard. This was no longer just a search for something hidden. This was a race against evil, against beings who would destroy everything to get what they wanted. We have to stop them, Mark said, his voice low but firm. I don't care how hard it is, but we'll find this Heartstone, and we'll stop the Seekers. Kalia looked at him, a flicker of appreciation in her eyes. We will. Together. The plan seemed simple. Find the Heartstone, unlock the power, and stop the Seekers. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. More to his connection to the power. Why had the power chosen him? Was he really capable of carrying such a heavy responsibility? Where do we even start looking? Mark asked, his mind racing with questions. We don't even know where to begin. Lyra seemed to consider this for a moment, her eyes distant, as if she was seeing something no one else could. There is a place, she said slowly, a hidden city. It lies deep beneath the earth, forgotten by time. That is where the Heartstone is kept. But beware, the Seekers are close. They have the means to find it. You must act quickly. The weight of Lyra's words hit Mark hard. A hidden city, deep beneath the earth. How were they supposed to find it before the Seekers did? We can't waste any time, Kalia said, her voice cutting through the tension. We have to go now. Mark nodded, still feeling the anxiety in his chest, but now with a new sense of purpose. He didn't know how he was connected to all this, but he had no choice. He couldn't let the Seekers win. Together, They gathered their things, preparing for a journey that would take them deep underground. They had no map, no guide, just a vague idea of where the hidden city might be. But Mark knew one thing for sure: time was running out, and they couldn't afford to fail. As they left the house, Mark glanced at Kalia. She seemed calm on the outside, but he knew she was just as nervous as he was. They were about to face something bigger than anything either of them had ever imagined. "We'll make it," Kalia said quietly, sensing his uncertainty. "We have to." Mark didn't respond right away. He just nodded, a quiet determination settling over him. The world they knew was about to change, but he wasn't going to back down. He would fight to protect what was good, to protect the people he cared about. They had no idea what dangers lay ahead, or how they would even begin to unlock the power within the Heartstone. But they did know one thing: the Seekers were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything. The race against time had begun. The journey into the depths of the earth had been long and exhausting. Mark, Kalia, and Lyra had traveled through narrow caves, crossed underground rivers, and navigated tunnels that seemed to twist and turn with no end. Yet, they were no closer to the hidden city Lyra had spoken of. The darkness seemed endless, but they pressed on, determined to find the Heartstone before the Seekers did. As they walked, the sound of their footsteps echoed in the stillness, amplifying the tension that hung between them. Mark's thoughts were consumed by the mission. What was this Heartstone? What powers did it hold? Why had it chosen him? These questions lingered in his mind, but there was no time for answers. They had to keep moving. "We're close," Lyra's voice broke through the silence. Her eyes scanned the walls, glowing softly in the dark. "I can feel it." Mark looked ahead, unable to see anything but shadows. "How do you know?" he asked, still unsure of what to expect. "The Heartstone radiates a unique energy." "I can sense it," Lyra replied, her tone filled with confidence. "It's near." Kalia, who had been walking beside Mark, spoke quietly. "We have to hurry. The Seekers could be right behind us." The mention of the Seekers sent a chill down Mark's spine. The thought of those ruthless beings finding the Heartstone first was enough to make his heart race. He had to keep moving. They all did. They pressed forward, their pace quickening as the tunnel began to widen. It was then that Mark saw it, a faint glow up ahead. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But as they drew closer, the glow became brighter, more defined. The Heartstone. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The crystal was massive, glowing with a warm, golden light that seemed to pulse with energy. It was placed on a pedestal made of ancient stone, surrounded by intricate carvings. The air around it felt thick with power. Mark stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the energy emanating from the stone. And for a moment, it was as if everything else faded away. The world, the Seekers, the dangers they faced, it all seemed distant. The only thing that mattered now was the Heartstone. "We found it," Kalia whispered, her voice filled with awe. But just as they moved closer, a loud, menacing sound echoed through the cave. Mark's heart skipped a beat. The Seekers had arrived. "No," Lyra hissed, her eyes flashing with anger. "We must protect the Heartstone at all costs." Mark and Kalia turned, scanning the shadows. They couldn't see the Seekers, but they could feel their presence growing closer. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet, as if the earth itself was warning them. "We need to act fast," Mark said, his voice sharp with urgency. "What do we do?" Lyra stepped forward, her hands outstretched toward the Heartstone. "We must unlock its power. Only then can we stop the Seekers." Mark hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to do it, but the pressure of the situation left him no choice. He stepped forward, reaching out to touch the Heartstone. The moment his hand made contact, a surge of energy flooded through him. He felt as if he were being consumed by light, his body vibrating with the power of the Heartstone. For a split second, He saw visions, ancient cities, vast landscapes, and strange beings, flashes of things he couldn't understand. It was as if the Heartstone was showing him its history, its secrets. And then, just as suddenly, the vision faded. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps, and he staggered back, dizzy from the experience. But the Heartstone had awakened. It glowed brighter than ever, and a wave of energy pulsed outward, filling the entire cave. The Seeker's menacing presence faltered, and Mark knew they had been affected by the Heartstone's power. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. "The Heartstone has responded to you." Mark felt a rush of strength coursing through him, and for the first time since this journey had begun, he felt confident. The power of the Heartstone was in his hands now. He was ready to protect it and keep it safe from the Seekers. But the Seekers weren't giving up. From the shadows, they appeared, dark figures, their eyes glowing with malice. Mark and Kalia stood in front of the Heartstone, ready to defend it with everything they had. "Stay back," Kalia warned, her voice fierce. "You won't take it from us." The Seekers laughed, a cruel sound that echoed in the cave. But they hesitated. They could sense the power of the Heartstone, and they knew they couldn't just take it without a fight. "Let's finish this," Mark said, clenching his fists. He didn't know what he was capable of, but he was ready to find out. The battle for the Heartstone was about to begin, and Mark knew this would be the most important fight of his life. The Seekers would stop at nothing to take it, but with the power of the Heartstone now awakened, Mark had the strength to protect it and the world. The final battle was upon them.